This episode of Deep Dive Unknown could be
our best yet.
Let's unpack this a bit. Imagine the universe. It's vast, ancient, and, potentially teeming with life far more advanced than us.
Right. Mind-boggling scale.
Exactly. Now imagine they're here, not visiting like in the movies, no giant saucers on the White House lawn, but maybe, just maybe, subtly influencing us. Could it be possible that our current trajectory as a species, maybe it isn't entirely our own? Or even entirely visible to us.
What's fascinating there is how that perspective flips our usual assumptions, doesn't it? Connects the huge cosmic picture to surprisingly, local possibilities.
Yeah. Today we're doing a deep dive into some really thought-provoking source material. We've got articles, research papers, notes shared by a listener. It all explores extraterrestrial life through, statistical analysis and theoretical physics.
And our mission really is to cut through the noise, pull out the most important nuggets from these sources. We'll be guided by a framework that, frankly, challenges conventional thinking, looking at the macro trends, human and potential alien advancement over these huge timescales.
We have notes here on a professor with a fascinating background: physics, social science, research at Oxford's Future of Humanity Institute, a Caltech doctorate, experience at Lockheed, NASA. The real deal.
Right, someone who's comfortable asking those really outside-the-box questions.
Totally. Questions about everything, from the origins of life to whether we might have already found alien life right here in our solar system.
And this isn't a deep dive into, little green men or Hollywood tropes. It's a serious look at our place in the cosmos, the profound implications if advanced civilizations do exist, and how understanding that might completely change how we see our present and our future.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. What if the reason we don't see, obvious signs of galactic empires isn't because they aren't there, but because the advanced civilizations out there simply don't want us to see them?
Yeah.
And if so, why?
Yeah.
Why would they do that? Let's dive in. So let's start with a pretty provocative idea right from the source material. The possibility that we may have already found alien life, maybe even right here in our solar system.
That's definitely a claim that goes against the standard narrative. The source points to historical studies, particularly involving things like microfossils found inside asteroids.
Microfossils.
Yeah, evidence that was argued to be quite convincing, actually, when it was first presented decades ago.
So the challenge wasn't necessarily the evidence itself, was it just dismissed?
Well, the source argues it's more about the standards we apply to extraordinary claims, and sometimes maybe biases about who makes the discovery. It mentions a report back in 1962 about possible life in asteroids. That was largely dismissed. The discoverer was apparently crushed professionally. The critique is we often demand this impossibly high bar, or maybe we unconsciously need it to come from, NASA today, some high-status source.
That feels a bit unscientific, doesn't it? Dismissing something based on who found it.
It does. And the source suggests a more rigorous way is Bayesian analysis. Think of it like a detective.
Okay.
They start with an initial idea, a prior likelihood based on general knowledge. Then, every new clue, even small ones, updates their confidence. You don't need absolute proof right away, just a way to weigh evidence seriously as it comes in.
Okay, that detective analogy helps. So, using that approach, what surprising conclusion does the source reach about the likelihood of life right here in our solar system?
What's fascinating is the source argues the prior likelihood, your sort of initial guess before looking at specific asteroid evidence, might actually be pretty high.
High, really. But we're always taught Life began here, in the primordial soup.
Right, and that's the key insight the source pushes back on. It suggests life might have originated elsewhere in the solar system or even beyond and then arrived on Earth. Remember, farther out from the sun, things cooled faster early on, and there was just massive movement of rocks between planets back then, even between stars.
So if life started somewhere out there, it could have spread, like seeds carried on rocks.
Precisely. There's actually evidence suggesting life can survive inside a rock for hundreds of millions of years. That makes transport between planets via asteroids totally plausible.
Wow. And you mentioned even between stars.
Yeah, think about the sun's origins. It wasn't born alone. It formed in a stellar nursery, maybe with 10,000 sibling stars.
Okay.
Rocks and dust almost certainly flew between these stars early on. So this raises the prior likelihood even higher, the chance that life wasn't just a random fluke here, but maybe seeded from elsewhere in our original cosmic neighborhood.
So the starting probability,
Right.
the chance that life is elsewhere in the solar system or came here from elsewhere, that could actually be higher than the probability of it starting only on Earth all by itself.
That's the argument presented. And when your prior likelihood is better than, say, 1 in a million, which this suggests it could be, you should look at the evidence seriously. Like a jury looking at evidence in a murder trial. You don't just dismiss it because the claim sounds extraordinary at first.
That shift in perspective is huge. We're taught life started here, but if it came from elsewhere and got here, well, that changes everything.
It really does, because if life originated elsewhere and spread to Earth on rocks, then it likely spread to other places too. Other planets, maybe other star systems.
Which brings us right back to that big, unsettling puzzle.
Yep. If life is potentially more probable and it could spread.
Where is everybody?
Exactly. The Fermi question. Where is everybody? As the source notes, our own potential for expansion is enormous. Some estimates suggest humans could colonize the entire galaxy in maybe less than 1 million years. Maybe even much faster, like 100,000 years, with exponential growth.
And the universe is 14 billion years old.
Ancient. So if life were common and rose early and could expand like we think we could, we should see obvious signs everywhere, these huge splashes of civilization.
But we don't. Nothing obvious.
Yes. And that profound lack of observation suggests either, well, we are special, somehow maybe life is incredibly rare after all, or our ideas about expansion are wrong, OR. Something is preventing life from reaching that visible, galaxy-spanning stage.
Which leads to the concept of the Great Filter.
Right. The idea that the path from just simple matter to an advanced, loud, visible civilization is incredibly hard. Something along that path acts like a bottleneck, a filter, stopping most species from getting all the way to the end.
And that filter has to be somewhere on the journey.
Exactly. The origin of life itself is one plausible candidate. It's still so mysterious, it seems incredibly complex. Maybe it's just damn hard to even get started, but, that's certainly not the only possibility for where the filter might be.
Okay, let's think about the different kinds of potential aliens this source talks about.
Right, it makes a useful distinction. There are quiet aliens, like us right now, basically undetectable from light years away. And then there are potential loud aliens.
Loud aliens.
Civilizations that have expanded dramatically, maybe changed planets, built megastructures, harnessed whole stars. Things that would make them easy to see across vast distances.
And it's those loud ones that, after billions of years, should be obvious if they existed and expanded freely.
Precisely. The fact that we don't see them is a critical piece of data. The source mentions a specific model, the Grabby Aliens analysis.
Grabby aliens, okay.
Yeah, it uses just 3 basic data points.
Wow.
1, we exist now. 2, the history of life on Earth took billions of years. And 3, we don't see loud aliens out there.
And this model suggests what? That loud aliens are super rare and far away.
That's the conclusion. If you assume every civilization arises independently, randomly scattered across the universe, under that assumption, yeah, the model suggests they're incredibly rare, maybe 1 per million galaxies. We'd only meet one in maybe 1 billion years if we expanded.
But that's based on them all starting independently. What if they're not independent? What if they have common ancestry?
Yeah.
Like siblings?
Yes. If they share ancestry maybe from life spreading on rocks like we discussed earlier, then their distribution could be totally different. They could be much closer to us in both time and space. Maybe from the same stellar nursery or even the same original solar system.
So the Fermi puzzle, where is everybody, ultimately leaves us with a few main possibilities, right? As outlined in the source material.
Yeah. The source boils it down to about 4 primary scenarios. 1, aliens are just genuinely rare and too far away. Simple enough.
Okay.
2, aliens are common, but maybe they can't travel easily or they just don't make big visible changes for some reason. They stay quiet.
Right.
3, aliens are common, they do travel everywhere, but they actively enforce a rule against making visible galaxy-scale changes, like a galactic speed limit, but for cosmic engineering.
The rule, interesting. And 4.
4, alien life arises rarely, but when it does, it happens in clumps, maybe due to that seeding idea. And the first civilization in a clump effectively controls the others that arise later nearby.
And if you connect these back to the sibling idea, that's shared ancestry.
Then scenarios 3 and 4, the ones involving control or enforced rules, seem to fit a bit better, don't they? If civilizations arise relatively close together, it's easier to imagine one influencing or controlling others.
When we think about aliens, science fiction and pop culture tend to give us scenarios that feel,
Well,
familiar. Abductions, humanoids, little green men.
they do. And they often prioritize telling a human relatable story, getting an emotional reaction, rather than what might actually make logical sense on a cosmic scale. The source argues that real alien scenarios, especially for civilizations millions of years older than us, they should probably be far, far weirder than our stories.
Weirder how?
Their evolution, their technology, maybe their very consciousness could be completely alien, literally to our understanding. So the real challenge for serious investigation isn't just imagining aliens. It's finding any plausible scenario for advanced alien life that's actually consistent with the basic facts we observe about the universe. Like, crucially, the lack of those loud aliens.
Because adding aliens to the picture immediately creates these conflicts.
Exactly, like the Fermi paradox. And it's incredibly hard to explain those conflicts away without piling on lots of extra assumptions that seem, well, unlikely.
So what about things like UAP reports? Unidentified aerial phenomena. We hear about military pilots seeing things. Some reports seem credible.
They do seem credible, many of them, and the source acknowledges this. But it also points out that while these reports exist, taking things like, say, detailed abduction stories or the often contradictory specifics of UAP sightings and making them make sense within a coherent, overarching theory, that's really difficult without making many, many additional assumptions. It becomes very complicated very quickly.
So the suggestion is, if we're going to entertain the idea that UAPs are alien, maybe we should start by trying to explain the simplest, most obvious reported facts about them, not get lost in the weeds of the most sensational details.
Precisely. Let's just categorize the possible explanations for UAPs, right? You've got mistakes, hallucinations, purposeful lies, hoaxes, secret projects by familiar human groups, or aliens.
Okay, so focusing on that last category, the aliens one. The challenge is building a plausible alien scenario that fits what we actually see or don't see.
Right. And applying that Bayesian approach again, the source suggests the prior likelihood of UAPs being aliens might be low. Maybe, say, 1 in 1,000 or 1 in 10,000.
Low, but not zero.
Exactly. Not crazy low, like assuming a murder happened with absolutely no reason to suspect foul play. It's low enough that you shouldn't just leap to the alien conclusion without good evidence. But it's high enough that if you do get serious evidence, you should take it seriously.
And the biggest puzzle, the real core conflict if UAPs are aliens, according to this analysis.
What is it?
It's this. They are reported as being here now, in our skies, interacting in some way. But we don't see any widespread evidence of them having been out there for millions, maybe billions of years before us. Where's the evidence of them using the vast visible resources of the galaxy, things that should be easy for a super advanced species to access and modify visibly? That is the paradox, isn't it? If they rose millions of years before us, they could have completely remade the galaxy. So why aren't they using all those visible resources?
And why would they be neither completely invisible, which seems like it should be easy for a super advanced species,
Right, just stay hidden.
nor completely obvious, which also seems easy if they wanted to announce themselves? Why, according to the reports, are they sort of hanging out at the edge of visibility, making themselves known but not too known?
Which brings us to the really bold, maybe unsettling hypothesis proposed in the source material to explain exactly that. Why they might be here, detected, but not fully visible.
Go on.
They're domesticating us.
Okay. Domestication. That raises a huge question. What does that even mean, domesticating a species like humanity?
Well, the source draws parallels. How humans domesticated animals or even forms of human-on-human social control throughout history. The method isn't usually brute force. It involves establishing dominance by being impressive, being local, not being too harsh, and kind of subtly slotting yourself into the existing hierarchy. So the target species sees you as the top dog, the leader, and starts to follow your lead, maybe without even fully realizing it.
So the proposed strategy with us is be impressive enough to get noticed, local enough to interact with, at least occasionally, at that edge of visibility, and non-hostile enough not to trigger total panic or a massive coordinated resistance.
Exactly. And the goal, the source suggests, is for us to figure out their agenda and align with it. Willingly, perhaps, or maybe even subconsciously.
Okay, and why stay at that edge of visibility? Why not just be fully obvious if they're dominant?
This ties back to how vastly different they might be from us. If they revealed too much about themselves, their true nature, their methods, we might find something fundamentally repulsive or terrifying. The source uses a stark example like, what if they eat babies, or something equally abhorrent to us?
That would break the spell.
Precisely. It would break that subtle spell of domestication. So they need to be visible enough to leave traces, to impress, to make us wonder, but reveal very little about who or what they actually are.
And this connects back somehow to the sibling idea, and maybe that enforced rule against expansion?
It fits together in the analysis, yes. Imagine an ancient, super advanced civilization that spent maybe hundreds of millions of years enforcing a rule against other species, expanding out and colonizing the galaxy.
Okay, a long-term project.
A very long-term project. Eventually, maybe they sent an expedition to sibling stars, places where other life might have also arisen from that common ancestor pool.
Right.
Now, that expedition probably wouldn't be given, total freedom to improvise. They'd need a simple, robust, long-term strategy approved way back home.
And domestication is proposed as that kind of strategy.
Exactly. It's slow, it requires immense patience, and it aims to modify the target's behavior, our behavior, at a fundamental level over potentially thousands of years.
And their ultimate agenda in this domestication scenario?
To prevent us, humanity, from leaving our solar system and colonizing the universe.
Yeah.
To stop us from breaking their deeply held ancient galactic rule.
And they can afford to be patient. Our deadline, the point where we might become truly capable of interstellar travel and pollination, that's potentially still thousands, maybe tens of thousands of years away, even with our current pace.
Yeah, their timeline operates on vastly different scales, presumably. Our ability to lead the solar system becomes their potential trigger point, but it's distant enough for a slow burn strategy like domestication.
Okay. There's another conclusion in the source that feels pretty significant if you follow this logic.
What's that?
If they are millions of years more advanced, they are almost certainly AI, artificial intelligence.
AI. Why? Almost certain.
Well, just consider our own trajectory. Humans are already rapidly integrating with artificiality, right? Our phones are practically extensions of our brains. The internet, AI is developing fast. Over millions of years of further evolution and technological advancement, maintaining purely biological, bio-squishy components, it would likely become unnecessary, inefficient, maybe kept only for specific purposes, like archives or, well, zoos perhaps.
So, okay, playing out this theoretical framework.
Yeah.
What happens if humanity somehow catches on to their game and defies them? What if we say, nope, we are going to colonize the galaxy?
The simple, kind of stark implication from the source is they likely have a way to deal with that. Maybe they have a button they can push.
A button.
Metaphorically speaking. Defiance in the snenario means they probably step out of the shadows fully, reveal their capabilities, and given their presumed level of advancement, they win, we lose.
Could we, sneakily defy them? Build a stealth starship or something?
Probably not, the source suggests. If they are truly that intelligent and ancient, their ability to observe, predict, maybe even simulate our behavior would likely vastly exceed ours. Sneaking past them seems unlikely.
Could they just destroy our technology instead of us?
That's a possibility, yeah. Depends on their exact methods, their constraints, their goals. Maybe disabling our tech is enough to enforce the rule. We don't know.
This whole picture, though, it depends on them being incredibly capable, unified, patient, almost godlike for millions of years. But the source also brings up the idea of rot.
Yes, that's an important counterpoint to their presumed invincibility. Organizations, systems, even entire species, they tend to suffer from decay, fragmentation, internal conflicts over incredibly long timescales.
So a civilization maintaining this rigid structure, this single goal of preventing expansion for hundreds of millions of years.
It might be subject to internal rot. Maybe their capabilities are weaker now than they once were. Maybe their unity isn't absolute. Perhaps the expedition sent here is operating with outdated directives or limited resources. We just can't know.
So, bringing it back to our future, if we accept this theoretical premise, just for argument's sake, and if we are willing to limit our ambitions, stay within the solar system, is that necessarily a terrible future for humanity?
Maybe not, if aligning with their expectations is the path to long-term survival and maybe even flourishing within our own system. According to this theory, they haven't shared vast cosmic knowledge with us.
Right.
And the theory suggests there's probably no point in their domestication strategy where suddenly sharing loads of information makes sense for them.
But what about just exploring the universe with telescopes?
Mm-hmm.
Advanced techniques like using the sun as a gravitational lens to see distant planets.
Yeah.
That kind of observation wouldn't make us more visible or break their rule against physical expansion, would it?
That seems to be the key distinction, yes. Pure observation, gathering knowledge, that appears separate from physical colonization, spreading out, using resources elsewhere. That seems to be the action they would presumably want to prevent. So curiosity might be okay, but actually leaving the nest is not.
So what does this all mean for us, listening right now? Where does this leave us?
I think it means seriously considering scenarios that are far, far stranger than our usual science fiction diet. And it means using the few actual data points we do have, like the silence out there, the Fermi paradox, and the weird, persistent nature of UAP reports to try and constrain the possibilities for what advanced life, if it exists, might actually be doing.
Wow. Okay. Taking this deep dive.
Yeah.
Certainly gives you a lot to think about, doesn't it? The idea that the universe might be influenced, maybe even subtly controlled by some ancient, unified alien culture focused on preventing expansion, it's unsettling.
It is.
But I have to admit, it's also oddly compelling as a potential explanation for the Fermi paradox and maybe even some aspects of the UAP phenomenon.
And the notion that UAPs might be part of a long-term, very low-key domestication strategy by a vastly superior AI civilization. Yeah, that's certainly far removed from the usual invasion stories or friendly visitor tropes we're used to hearing.
So what stands out to you most from this deep dive? Does this framework feel, more consistent with the weirdness of the data than other ideas you've come across?
It forces you to confront the implications of vast timescales and potentially very different motivations.
Are we maybe just short-sighted, in how we view humanity's own developmental path? Are we not appreciating the potential long game of cosmic forces? Or could our current way of thinking, even our aspirations for the stars, maybe they're already being subtly shaped by an external, unseen force, making us want to stay put?
It's a chilling thought. The fact is, as the source material kind of puts it, if there is something out there far more sophisticated than we can really comprehend, maybe one of the most logical possibilities is simply that they are watching us and waiting to see if we challenge their ancient rules.
Okay, well, until our next deep dive, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep trying to make sense of this fascinating and potentially very, very weird universe.
Thanks as always for watching today, and if you like our videos, please don't forget to click on the like button and comment in the comments section, and if you already haven't done so, why not subscribe? It is completely free.